everyone, welcome back to my channel for a brand new mystery with Molly. If you are new around here, if you've never seen my face before, then hi, my name is Molly and I post true crime videos like this every single week, so if you think that's something that you might want to stick around for, then definitely subscribe. I did mention this in last week's video, but it is my current goal to get to 30,000 subscribers by my 21st birthday, which is the 12th of June. As I'm filming this, we're at almost 28k, so we're getting closer to 30k. So if you're watching this right now and you aren't subscribed and you would like to see some more from me, then please do hit that button. Also, don't forget to switch on the little notification bell next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will notify you every single time that I post. But anyway, today we are going to be talking about the unsolved case of Lindsay Jo Rimer. I feel like this video will probably be a little bit shorter than my usual videos just because there isn't too much information about this case online, but I still really wanted to cover it regardless because, like I said, this case is still unsolved, and I feel like the more attention and awareness we can give to this case, the better chance we have of solving it. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling and we shall just get into it. So this case took place in November of 1994 in Hebden Bridge, which is a town in Upper Calder Valley in West Yorkshire in England. And this is Lindsay Jo Rimer. Now, she was a 13-year-old girl born on the 17th of February 1981 to parents Gordon and Jerry Rimer. And she was one of 4 siblings. She had an older sister named Kate, an older brother named Daniel, and a younger baby sister named Juliet, who I believe was only about 17 months old at the time of this case taking place. Lindsay lived in a house on Cambridge Street in Hebden Bridge, and she went to Calder High School. She was in year 9, and she was described as being a very happy, bubbly, and popular young girl. And her mother, Jerry, said that Lindsay always dreamed of attending university in a couple of years. She was really looking forward to doing that. That was her ultimate dream. And she definitely had the potential to do this, to go to university. She was a very bright girl and she had her whole life ahead of her, but it would all be taken away on November the 7th, 1994. It was around 10 p.m. that evening when 13-year-old Lindsay left her home on Cambridge Street to go to the local shop to buy some cornflakes for her breakfast the next morning. On her way there, she actually stopped at the local trades club located on Holmes Street because her mother Jerry was there having a drink and a catch up with a friend of hers. And when she got there, Jerry just asked her daughter Lindsay if she wanted to have a soft drink and stay for a little while, but Lindsay said no thanks, and she left the pub to go to the shop. And that would be the last time that Jerry ever saw her 13-year-old daughter again. After leaving the trades club, Lindsay went straight to the local Spar shop on Crown Street where she purchased a box of cornflakes at 10:22 p.m. She is caught on CCTV in the shop paying for the cornflakes, but after this sighting, after she left the shop, Lindsay Rimer was never seen alive again. Lindsay never returned home that night, and she didn't turn up for her paper round the next morning, and so her parents just knew that something was wrong, and so they contacted the police and reported her as missing. Now, in the early stages of the investigation, the West Yorkshire police actually thought that Lindsay was just a runaway. They believed that this 13-year-old girl had just left of her own accord, that she wanted to run away. They didn't think that something more sinister may have happened to her. However, her family were not having that for 1 minute. They knew Lindsay. She had never run away from home before, and she had no reason to want to run away either. And so the police began to take her disappearance more seriously, and a large-scale manhunt was set up to find Lindsay Rimer. They searched the whole of the Hebden Bridge area, including forests, lakes, hillside areas. So many volunteers from the local community all came together to help find this young girl. But unfortunately, days passed and there was absolutely no sign of Lindsay Rimer. They couldn't find any clues or evidence to suggest what might have happened to her that night. Not long after her disappearance, Lindsay's older sister Kate took part in a short reenactment of the evening that Lindsay went missing, and she played Lindsay. And they basically filmed Kate retracing Lindsay's last known movements that night, and they released it to the public in the hopes that someone would remember something, remember seeing her that night and come forward to the police. But no one really did. It seemed as though no one saw Lindsay that night. It was literally like she had just vanished into thin air. No one even knew if she was still alive. And then 5 months after Lindsay went missing, a body was discovered in the town of Hebden Bridge. It was the 12th of April 1995 when two canal workers named Andy Glover and Charlie Streets were doing their job of checking the Rockdale Canal, which is a canal that runs through the town of Hebden Bridge. And as part of their weekly routine, the two men would have to check the lengths of the canal. So they would walk up and down the canal and they would check like the reed beds, they would pull anything out of the water that had fallen in, and sometimes this was dead animals like deceased sheep and deceased deer. And on this particular day in April of 1995, the two men spotted something in the water about a mile upstream from the centre of Hebden Bridge. And when they first saw this thing in the water, they thought it was just another dead sheep that they would have to pull out. So they were pulling it towards them, and it was then when Andy realised that it wasn't a dead sheep at all. They had actually found the dead body of 13-year-old Lindsay Rimer, who had disappeared just 5 months prior. I've got a quote from Andy, the canal worker, here from an interview where he recalls that day, and he says, quote, "We thought that it was from a sheep. As we pulled it towards us, the body rolled in the water. There was no mistaking who it was. We saw the strands of hair on her face and knew we had found Lindsay Rimer. I got home late that day and my wife was asking where I'd been and why I hadn't phoned. I just said, we have found her. I didn't need to say who. She knew instantly I was talking about Lindsay. It has stayed with me and it always will." And so what was previously just a missing persons case was now a murder inquiry. So obviously, as soon as they found Lindsay's body, Andy and his co-worker contacted the police and she was taken for an autopsy and her family were notified. Lindsay's body had actually been weighed down in the canal with 2 large heavy concrete boulders, so someone really didn't want it to float to the top and be found. Her cause of death was found to have been from strangulation, and it was clear to the coroner that there had been a violent struggle before she died. Lindsay's voice box had actually been flattened against her spinal column, and according to one source I read online, there were signs of congestion around the middle of her neck muscles, suggesting that there was a lot of pressure applied there. The coroner also concluded that there were no signs on Lindsay's body to suggest that she had been sexually assaulted. However, he did believe that her body had been submerged in water, had been in that canal for quite some time, probably since around the time that she disappeared 5 months before. So given the fact that this was now a murder inquiry, the West Yorkshire Police released a new appeal urging anyone with any information regarding this case to come forward. And this appeal did bring forward a new lead in July of 1995, 3 months after Lindsay's body was recovered. A man came forward to the police and he told them that he remembered something from the night that Lindsay Rimer disappeared. He recalled seeing 2 men that night in Hebden Bridge acting really strange and suspicious, and then together they sped away in a green van. Could these 2 men have abducted Lindsay in their green van and then drove away with her inside and then killed her elsewhere? Now, somehow the police actually managed to track this exact green van that the man saw that night, and it was traced all the way to Ireland. Here they questioned a 20-year-old man that they thought could have been involved in Lindsay's murder. However, they quickly determined that he had nothing to do with the case, and so he was released without charge. As the investigation continued, the police questioned and spoke to over 5,000 people and collected over 100 witness statements regarding the night that Lindsay vanished. However, all of these were looked into and they just resulted in dead ends. So at this point, the police decided to look into different places in the area where Lindsay could have been murdered before her body was dumped in the canal. And they found that on Lindsay's route home, so the route that she would have taken the night that she disappeared to get back to her house from the local shop, they found that there was a towpath that would not have been lit at night, like there were no street lights around, so it would have been pitch black when Lindsay was walking past it. And obviously that would be the perfect area, the perfect opportunity for her killer to abduct Lindsay, because it's pitch black so no one would see him do it. And this towpath also had access to the canal where Lindsay's body was dumped. So I think the police were theorising that maybe this towpath was where Lindsay was abducted and killed, and then the killer just put her body in the water. And I believe that the police did look around this area, look around this towpath to see if they could find anything, but I couldn't find any information on whether they actually did, on whether they found any evidence to suggest that this was where Lindsay was snatched from. So I'm guessing that they did look into it and just found nothing. Soon months turned into years and the police never really came close to catching Lindsay's killer. The case just went completely cold. But her family never gave up. They tried so hard to keep Lindsay's memory alive. They would hold vigils in November every single year because that was the month that she disappeared. Pictures of Lindsay were also kept in shop windows in Hebden Bridge for several years after her murder. Everyone was just hoping that one day someone would come forward with the information that the police needed to crack the case. There were a few suspects in Lindsay's murder over the years that were looked into, the first being John Taylor, who was responsible for the murder of 16-year-old Leanne Tiernan. I actually covered Leanne's case a while ago now, so if you haven't seen it, I'll leave it linked in the description box. But John Taylor killed Leanne Tiernan in the year 2000 in West Yorkshire, so the same area where Lindsay Rimer was killed 6 years earlier. And the police did look into him as a suspect in Lindsay's case. However, they found no evidence linking John to the crime, and so he was ruled out. The second suspect was John Oswain, a convicted rapist who was jailed for life in 1998, so just 4 years after Lindsay was killed. John had raped 2 women, however he didn't kill them, and so the police weren't convinced that he could have been Lindsay's killer because obviously she was murdered, but there were no signs that she was sexually assaulted, and John's motive for his attacks was clearly sexual. Another man that people suspected could have been involved in Lindsay's murder was Scottish serial killer Peter Tobin, who was convicted of 3 murders of 3 young girls between the years 1991 and 2006. Lindsay appeared to fit the profile of Peter Tobin's victims pretty well. They were all young girls / young women, and his method of killing was strangulation, the same way that Lindsay was killed. But to be honest, I don't know if Peter Tobin was ever a suspect in the police's eyes. I think it was more the public that suspected him, but regardless, he has never been linked to Lindsay's murder. I don't know if the police ever did look into him as a possible suspect in Lindsay's case, because even though he was convicted of 3 murders, it was thought that he was responsible for a lot more. Anyway, moving on, in the year 2016, Lindsay's younger sister Juliet did a reappearance to try and find her sister's killer. If you remember, Juliet was only actually 17 months old at the time Lindsay was murdered in 1994, so she says that she doesn't really remember anything at all about her sister, but her family are still so desperate to find out who did this to her and why. Now, according to some sources online, it was reported that in August of 2017, the West Yorkshire Police had been working with a Canadian team of forensic specialists to try and obtain a DNA profile of Lindsay's killer. And apparently they did. They managed to collect a DNA profile, although I don't actually know how. I'm guessing that maybe after all these years, with all the new advancements in forensic technology, they were able to get some DNA from her clothing, and they were able to get a small DNA profile from this. And the police were hopeful that they could develop this further and finally find a match. So they do have a small DNA profile of Lindsay's killer, but they just haven't managed to successfully match it to anyone yet. In November of 2016, a 63-year-old man from Bradford was arrested on suspicion of Lindsay's murder, but he was later released on bail. The following year, in April of 2017, another man who was 68 years old was also arrested, but he was later released without further action. I'm not sure why the police suspected these two men in the first place, but they were ruled out as having anything to do with Lindsay's case. And that is pretty much it for this case. I really hope that this case is still being looked into and investigated today. It has almost been 26 years since Lindsay Jo Rimer was murdered, and her family are still looking for answers and trying to get some justice for her death. I'm going to leave some contact details in the description box, so if anyone watching this has any information regarding this case, please do get in contact with the police. You can remain anonymous if you want to, so if you know anything about this case, I know it's a long shot, but the information will be down below. But yeah, that is it for this case. As usual, please do let me know your thoughts and opinions on it in the comments. Before I go, I just want to give a special shout out to the members of my Patreon page. Thank you so much for your support, guys. If anyone else wants to become a member of our little Patreon family, the link is always in the description box of my videos. Please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Also leave me your suggestions for other unsolved cases that I can cover in the comments. And I will see you again next week for another mystery with Mollie. Bye guys.